I am so privileged this morning to introduce to you Emily Sloan. She began her career as a therapist, but transitioned into a coach who teaches people how to trust themselves as an antidote to anxiety. I'm eager to learn more about her self trust model. It's an innovative framework designed to empower women to live confident, intentional, and expansive lives. I love all three of those words. So, congratulations for having your article published in Authority Magazine. It's titled Effective Strategies for Mental Well-Being. So, Emily, anxiety seems to be an epidemic in our culture today. I'm wondering why you left traditional therapy and developed a very courageously developed a very different kind of practice.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Nancy, for having me. I'm, yeah, honored to be here speaking with you as well. And yeah, it was a big transition. It was a career therapist for 13 years and had put a lot of work in to be a therapist before that. It really was a big shift, to transition out of, working under my license and working in that one-on-one capacity that I had done for so many years.
Mhm.
Um, and truly, it was kind of a testament to kind of what I teach inside the model is this like element of really tuning in, to what's alive in me and that wisdom in me that's telling me, and
Yeah.
trusting that, even when like logically I'm like, no, but this is what you went to school for, and this is what you do, and
Yeah.
you spend all this time building a practice. Like, what do you mean you're going to close it down and shift directions? But it's like that inner wisdom was like very clear and was like, no, this is the next right step. You've got to shut that down. You've got to take this next step, and a little bit of leaping into the unknown. So very much it's been kind of a testament to the work I do with other people, but like very much applying it to myself. But to back up a little bit, yeah, so all my work, I very much focus my career, in the realm of trauma in lots of different ways. But people would come for different things, whether it was anxiety or, people pleasing, or they're in some big transition in life, but regardless of what they were coming in for, I started to notice that like once they started to tap into that intuition, once they were able to connect to themselves and start to trust themselves more, it's like on the other side of that, like that's where the real like magic and like, healing and just like genuine confidence came from. So I started to see it as like this byproduct. All the things that they wanted, all the goals that they had, they were these byproducts of trusting themselves more. And so I'm like, okay, there's something here. Like when I started to see that time and time again, and then like when I started to apply it to like reflectively looking at my own path, I'm like, oh yeah, that tracks for me too. I was like, there's something here. And so that's really when I started to shift to creating a model to help people, because I knew it wasn't going to be as simple as me saying, hey, I figured out the answer. The answer is trust yourself. So like just do that. Like I'm like, that's not going to work. So it's like I really wanted to distill down like what are the concepts, the tools, the actual tangible practices that people could do to cultivate more trust. And so that really led me on kind of a parallel path for a while, where I had my individual one-on-one practice, while I was also cultivating this model and starting to think about how to do this in a more group capacity and kind of out of on the edges, on the outskirts of like the way I had done things before. And yeah, the further I got, I'm like, okay, this is it. Keep going this way. So yeah, that's sort of how I've ended up here away from my traditional kind of therapy practice.
In my personal experience, it seems like so many times when I make the decision to trust that inner voice, it is like leaping off a cliff into the unknown
Yes.
because it goes against whatever mental model um, I have before.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I talked a lot about like life scripts. We have these like scripts of like what we're supposed to do and what we should do. And a lot of those are, based in logic and
Yes.
safety. And it's like, yeah, it takes a lot of courage to be like, no, I'm actually going to do something different, because like this sense inside is so powerful. And I know it's worth listening to.
I really admire your courage, and I
Mm.
went on your website yesterday and downloaded one of your products, and I'm just so impressed with the work you've done. So I'm
Mm.
grateful that you agreed to join me here today for this interview. How does anxiety, or how has anxiety manifested in you in
Mm.
particular?
Yeah, I would say for me personally, it actually didn't look maybe the way that I heard it described. Like when I was in grad school, I never would have been like, oh, I resonate with the way people talk about anxiety. For me, it was a little bit more of the like insecurity, of like doubting myself,
Mhm.
questioning, second guessing, kind of wanting to turn over like decisions to someone else, like somebody
Yes,
else, like
yes.
universe, come give me a sign, like
Somebody
somebody
tell
else.
me what to do.
Yeah, which is, I mean, so familiar being a therapist for so long, how often people would come to me and say the same thing. It's like,
Yes.
okay, somebody tell me what to do. And it's like, oh, wait, I don't have that answer for you. And so, yeah, for me, that's really what it was. It was more this insecurity, doubt. It wasn't necessarily, again, some of the ways that we hear anxiety talk about in terms of like the physical components of like racing heart or panic attacks or ruminating thoughts, things like that. It was more of that just kind of like deeply embedded insecurity, and so really having to go deep in to understand the roots of that insecurity to be able to build that trust. Yeah, and then anxiety really shifting as a byproduct of that.
I mentioned, or you mentioned in your article, that anxiety has a message for us. How do
Mm.
we learn what the message is? How do I identify that message?
Yeah, yeah. So this is I lean heavily in my training on parts work or internal family systems, IFS. So if anybody's familiar with those terms, parts work, inner child work, IFS, my lens is through IFS, but is really I love the approach because it's very non-pathologizing. So we're not looking at like getting in a battle with anxiety of like I'm going to overcome or fight my anxiety. Anxiety is very wise and will often get stronger and louder if we try to fight it or we try to like push it away. And so instead, this IFS approach is much more coming at all the different parts of ourselves with compassion and with curiosity and trying to understand them because they all have a positive intent. No matter how like detrimental they can feel in our life and they can feel like they're trying to ruin our life. It feels like, oh, anxiety is like taking over, it's trying to control and ruin things. It's like, actually, no, there's a reason that anxiety is showing up. And again, it has this really positive intent. We just have to slow down enough and get curious enough and listen enough to be able to understand what that intent is. So um, I'm a big tea drinker. I love hot tea. It's like just one of my yeah, it's one of those things I can just do all day long. I get very
Uh-huh.
excited about it. And so when I think about connecting to anxiety or fear, what I do is I have this like way of approaching it, like inviting the fear, inviting the anxiety to tea. So it's like you're
Mhm.
inviting it in. And sometimes, it's just like sitting down. Yeah, like you would invite in, an old friend in for tea and like sit and chat and catch up. It's like, okay, here, come in. I'm not going to like leave you out in the cold. I want you to come in and let's talk. Let me get to know you. Let me understand you. Let me just be with you. And a big question that I ask anxiety or these parts are like, what are you afraid would happen if you stop showing up?
Mhm.
So what is this anxiety is what's going to happen if the anxiety wasn't there? What's the fear underneath that? And that's really the message there. That's what this part is trying to protect you from. So it's a way to get to that.
So I am familiar with internal family systems,
Mhm.
and you dialogue with the part that rather than fighting it,
Yeah.
you
Mhm.
dialogue with it to find out what purpose are you serving for
Yeah.
me? Is that right?
Mhm. Yep. Yeah. What's the role that you're playing in my life and how are you trying to protect me? Because the big thing is around protection. They all have positive intent. So like what's the protective role that you're playing?
I I love the approach because I know that, whatever we fight tends to get stronger instead of
Yeah.
less.
Uh-huh.
Um, One of the recommendations you make is to be radically honest with yourself. How does one cut through all the minutia of our daily lives to get really honest with yourself?
Yes, I love that question. And I would specifically around radical honesty, because I think when I talk about it, sometimes people get a little like, oh, I don't know, that sounds like really hard. And it can be, but which is why we don't. I don't kind of teach radical honesty as like a one-time thing or this thing that you go straight to the heart of like the most honest you could possibly be about everything all at once. You know, we actually do it in layers. And so starting on kind of the outer edges of getting honest with yourself. And so that might be looking at some of those like scripts I was talking about earlier, like those life scripts that you were handed. It's like just kind of asking yourself, like, what's working in life? What's
Yes.
not working? And just kind of starting with some questions that might feel a little bit safer around those edges. But again, when we think about building trust in yourself, the reason that you have to be radically honest to build trust is, you know, like if we're thinking about building trust with somebody else in our life, like we don't trust somebody who lies to us, even if
Yes.
they have good intentions, even if they have really good intentions
Yes.
about, you know, why they're, you know, kind of skirting around the truth. We don't trust them. And so it's the same when it comes to trusting ourselves. We have to start to be honest. And so, but again, doing it in layers. I talk a lot about titration, so little bits at a time. So do kind of one layer of being honest, and then maybe kind of explore some of the other directions in the model, kind of do some other things, and then come back and maybe you can go deeper into a deeper layer of honesty. And so it's just like working and not shaming yourself that like, oh, I can't go right to the center of all the honesty at once.
Hmm. I think that, in my experience anyway, the rules that I was assumed I needed to live by were the rules I needed to question. Like, is
Mm.
this rule working for me? I heard you say that a minute ago, to question the
Yeah.
guidelines that we set up that are either artificial or cultural or from our family. Is this rule working for me, or do I need to replace it with something better?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think for some of us, they're so they've been handed down so unconsciously that the first
Yes.
step is even just identifying that you did have a rule handed to you or you had a script
Yes.
handed to you because we just assume that's what everybody got, but we actually got different life scripts
Yes.
depending on our culture, the generation we were born into, you know, our gender, you know, where we live, you know, there's all these different things
Right.
that give us different scripts. And so it's first identifying like, oh, wow, this is a script that I was handed that not necessarily everybody else got.
Right.
And so starting there can be an entry point in before even asking yourself, like, does this work or does this not work?
Oh, such important work. How can a woman who has a job, perhaps a husband, children, prioritize spending quality time with herself?
Mm. Yeah, I think I love that question because I do think it's so important. And I think the answer is going to be different for everybody. My answer might not feel the most attainable for most people because I just naturally am a morning person. I know some people struggle
Yeah.
with that when people are like, get up earlier. And like, they're like, no, I can't. But for me, it actually comes very naturally to wake up early. But then again, I go to bed at like 8:30, so it works out
Yes.
well. But I have worked with my partner around that, like finding time and ways to protect some of that solitude for me because it very much is important to me to connect into myself and to find practices that bring me back to myself so that I can show up for our family and for my work and for friends. And like, I know that if I'm not connecting in, I'm not showing up in those other capacities either. So it's kind of a non-negotiable for me.
It's funny. It's the next question I was going to ask you. But before I do that, um, prioritizing time for ourselves goes against many of our society's rules for women, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's like you have to really challenge that assumption that it's wrong to put
Mm-hmm.
myself first for at least
Mm-hmm.
part of the day. So many of the people that I interview mention one or two things that are non negotiable.
Mm.
And what are your non negotiables in your daily routine?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. So in terms of the daily routine, it's kind of simple, but yeah, hot tea first thing in the morning. Like every day starts with tea. It's like my little tea time with myself. I love it. Movement has always been a big practice for me. It's looked different throughout my life. You know, I played basketball in college. I ran marathons. I've done lots of different things. Right now, it's very much connecting to nature, getting out and hiking, moving my body in that way. Um, and so, like, knowing that the movement can look different at different seasons of life, but having some movement absolutely non-negotiable. I've got to get movement in. It's where I connect to myself. It's where I process things, or like our bodies literally are able to process better when they're moving. And so yeah, I would say those two. I probably have some more, but we'll stick to
Okay,
those two. Yeah.
those are two good ones.
Mhm.
You said you would love to have a private visit with Michael Jordan. I'm wondering why you chose Michael Jordan.
Oh gosh, I mean, it's just a no-brainer for me. I mean, if I could show you all the memorabilia I had as a kid from Michael Jordan, he just was just like it for me. Yeah, basketball was kind of life growing up, and Michael Jordan was the end all be all for me. So I've just kind of stuck with it. Like, yeah, for sure, would love to have a sit down chat with him sometime.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay, so it sounds like he started out as a hero to you as a child.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
So I downloaded your free Reflect and Set booklet. I
Hmm.
love it. I've begun using it as a guide for journaling,
Oh,
working my way
good.
through it. Thank you for offering this guide for identifying what has been working well and what
Mhm.
isn't working well, and how to plan the next section of my life around things that work well for me. I really love your emphasis on the encouragement to trust ourselves.
Mm.
Thank you for bringing that wonderful work to the world and for having the courage to change your practice so that you could um, emphasize or to help people learn how to trust themselves. For those of you who are listening, you can learn more about Emily Sloan and her work by reading the entire article published by Authority Magazine. She's also the author of a book called Can People Really Change? 13 Lessons from 13 Years as a Therapist. That's really an intriguing title. You can also reach her by going to her website, curiosityrising.com. Excuse me, .com. I love the I love the title of your book,
Oh,
curiosityrising.com. Thank you so
yeah.
much for joining me this morning. I wish you the very best.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
My privilege. Bye bye.
Bye.